I'm not going to belabor this. Let's just call out the director, Rita Coburn. And don't think I'm depriving her of a thumb. She received one before, and we give only one per lifetime. And let's also call out the producer, Brenda Robinson. And joining them will be Dr. Douglas Arnell Williams, who is he was a past Fulbright Scholar in Africa and National Park Service, and he's currently, I'm not wearing my glasses. I have to put them on. I'm so sorry. This is bad jazz. He is a Landscape Architecture Foundation Fellow for Innovation and Leadership. Thank you, Dr. Doug. He's going to be the moderator, and we are calling out our very own Nell Minow. I just have to tell you how much I enjoyed that so much. I knew a lot about Marian Anderson, and I did not know about the Albert Einstein connection. That was just incredible. You did a lot of work. I really enjoyed it. I think everybody here did too. Thank you so much.
Well, that must be a biographer or a documentarian's dream to have access to that incredible archive of material. So can you tell us a little bit about some of that research that you did? And that was her own voice, right? With that wonderful little laugh of hers.
One of the things that happens when you're putting together a documentary, you have to use what's available. So you saw in some scenes we had reenactments. In some scenes we did scenery so that we could elongate the scene and you could hear her voice. The University of Pennsylvania has her archive. That's your school, isn't it? Yeah. They have a wonderful archive. 4,000 photographs. I was able to look at each one. 6,000 letters. I could not read them all. But what we did was pull from letters from her mother, from Orpheus, and so on. And then Marian Anderson kept everything. And so as a result, we would be able to find some in the Marian Anderson Museum that Jillian Pertell had. And then also the family just opened up everything they had. And so it was a lot of work. It was a lot of wonderful research, but that's something directors like to do. We're like frustrated librarians. We want you to see it, but we love to read it and to look at it. So it was a joy, really.
I think that's so beautiful in terms of even the reenactments, but you also have some readings done by two extraordinary actors, Regina Taylor, as well as Harry Lennox, right? And so there's this romance of Orpheus and Marian Anderson, and so tell us a little bit about that selection and choice.
Well, I think that one of the things you want to do when you do a documentary is have you see the person as a whole person. If you have 90 minutes or 2 hours, you start at a point of failure. They've lived 90 years. You can't get that all in. So you do have to pick and choose. And you know that there are other works done, usually on icons, so people can fill in the blanks. But to answer your question, and a part of Nell's that I failed to answer, that it was her voice, she had done a book, My Lord, What a Morning. And in that book, she had done recordings in the 50s. It just so happened that an archive like that takes about 20 to 30 years to complete. And I happened to get to the library at the point where they were putting her voice tapes together. So we had 32 cassette tapes, which we had transcribed and digitized in order to get her voice. And instead of using a narrator, we worked her voice around that. But when it got to the letters, we needed to have two people read. And so Regina Taylor is a great friend, and Harry Lennox is her friend. And I said, can you all read these letters for us so that people can get a sense of this very engaging romance that is such an important part of her life?
I love those letters. We could have a separate documentary just about their relationship. Now, we must hear about this production company with the Clintons and Sam Branson. Tell us a little bit about what that is.
Well, let me thank you for that opportunity. Let me start by saying just how privileged I feel to be on this stage. I want to share with you all the full circle moment that's happening right now. It was actually just a few short years ago that Rita and I met at this festival. We were sitting in the green room having lunch. Michael Barker was actually on the other side of you, having a riveting conversation about what she's working on of late. And we started talking about this project, and it was out of this conversation right here at Ebertfest that we decided to work together. And what that really highlights, thank you, and Rita will say this all day long, how important, really how critical this festival is to bringing this film community together and audiences that really care about cinema. So we're thankful and never imagined a moment like this where we could come back, and especially today. I told Rita to touch my makeup up behind this stage. I was just sort of tearing up throughout, listening to all of you take in this material. This was such a big deal to just have an audience today, to experience that for the first time, and really to see a film how it was meant to be seen, to hear the sound, and to look at these images, but then to share this with all of you was just such an incredible experience. So thank you, the audience, for giving me that today. Thank you, Rita, for this. So to digress, I happily am, I serve Rita as an executive producer and really as one who gathers resources, and that's in part the role that I play for Secretary Clinton now in Chelsea. It seems everyone is interested in getting into the storytelling space these days, and frankly, it's wonderful to welcome all of these voices, and so I've now welcoming them into the nonfiction space in particular, because they, like many people, feel that storytelling is their way to be impactful, and we just want to continue that ecosystem.
I was going to ask Rita, in terms of, I was here at that time when you all were making that decision, unbeknownst to me that I would be up here on stage and this documentary would be presented. But at that time, you had worked on Maya Angelou, one of my adopted grandmothers, without any permission. She didn't know that, but you know, I've now adopted Marian Anderson as a great aunt. I encourage you to do the same. Before you, what was the difference between Dr. Angelou's documentary and Anderson? Obviously, one was in their 80s when they passed, and others in their 90s. Two extraordinary women, African American, at a certain time in American history. What was that like? What were the contrasts and similarities, if there were?
You know, again, when you have a person, Marian Anderson was born in 1897. Maya Angelou was born in 1928. And so their paths crossed at a point, and Maya Angelou loved opera as well. And so I would meet people like Angela Brown at Maya Angelou's home when I was working on that. But I really feel like when you look at the lives of African Americans in this country, even more so than anything, and a lot of ethnic white groups, but I know more my people. I'm in love with my people. I find that when I was a little girl, I'd look on the TV and I didn't see myself. I didn't see my mama May May and my uncle Sport, and when I saw someone going dynamite, that might have been funny, but that's not the people I knew. So I figured that I needed to tell these stories. So telling Maya Angelou's story and telling Marian Anderson's story answered my feisty Pippi Longstocking prayer to God. Where my folks at on the TV set? Well, I guess the answer was, why don't you put them on there and then you will see them. So it became a mission of mine to tell the stories of my family. And like you, I consider Maya Angelou, she was somebody I sent poems, horrible poems to, and I would receive a little note from Miss Garrett, who was her person at the time, thanking me for these things. And I never would know that later I would work for Oprah Winfrey. She would start Oprah Radio, and nobody wanted Maya Angelou as a host. They all said, she's so close to Oprah, you mess up with her, you're done. And I was sitting there praying, give me Maya Angelou. And that's what happened. And so I would do a radio show at her home. Oprah said, don't make her come out of the house, she's older. Well, I like my women over 80, so that was no problem for me because I grew up with older Black women. And so telling her story was a joy to spend time with her. With Marian Anderson, I didn't have her there. So I had to read more and do research and talk to people. So the major difference was not having the person there to tell you. But again, someone's 20-year-old voice, their 40-year-old voice, and their 80-year-old voice is different. We were able to pull those voices together for both. So that was the similarity, because Marian Anderson's voice was on tape, and that helped us to pull together those women. And I think for all women in this country, there is a struggle to find their voice. Marian Anderson found her vocal and her speaking voice, and Maya Angelou found her writing and speaking voice.
We're going to have some questions from the audience in just a second. So think about what you want to ask, come up with some really good questions. But first I'm going to ask all three of you, which was your favorite of the songs that Marian Anderson performed?
For me, well, I like them all, but I was listening, I did some homework, as I normally do when I come to this program, and it's always a joy to do this type of work. And I was listening to many of, I had gotten every CD, children's book, adult book, autobiography, biography. Not that I was going to get to all of it in this short period of time, but I did hear one of the songs. I think you opened with the song, Anchored in the Lord. And at the very latter part of that song, she hits those higher notes that Denise Graves was talking about. Because the other ones are kind of in that range of the Negro spiritual, but she starts in this upper area. I'm like, whoa, she's really giving it to him right now. So that's my new favorite one. So then to find out that you open with that, I'm like, oh, okay, there it is.
I personally enjoyed her rendition of My Country 'Tis of Thee, obviously because she took creative liberties that made it a more inclusive song. I love my country so much. I love seeing her, someone who's such an icon, also embracing it, taking it as her own as well, and sending the message that it belongs to all of us.
I have to say that Poor Me was a song that really, for me, set the tone of the history and the time. And to hear her sing that song, I would often play it right before the interviewee would talk and allow them to hear it and then do the interview, because I just felt that she elevated beyond that, but she was constrained by some things. So Poor Me was my song.
All good choices. All right, who have we got in the audience who is ready to ask a question?
And do you have a favorite song?
Yes, thank you. Ave Maria was my favorite. Yeah, it's just exquisite. But they're all great. How are we doing for a question? Do we have the microphone out there somewhere?
Yes.
Anybody? Just
We
raise
have a
your
question over on your left here.
It's such an extraordinary story, and to see it presented this way is really fantastic. And I was just wondering if you've thought about a fictionalized, not fictionalized, but a dramatic
narrative.
version of this
A
story as
narrative.
opposed to documentary, and how you would feel about something like that.
You know, one of the things that happens with narrative films is that they really like to take on a tone currently of some sensationalism. And one of the things that they found about Marian Anderson's story, and it may still happen, but we've posited it, it was like, where's the something that is more difficult? The thing I like about documentaries is we're just telling life, and most people I know find that difficult enough. But the thing about it is, I would love to work on that and making the transition from a documentarian to narrative. I think that can happen and has happened for a number of my peers, and I'm working on some things, but I don't know about her story, but I will tell you that there should be a Broadway play coming soon. So keep looking for that.
It's going to be a casting challenge.
I'll just add, because the funny thing is, the perspective that I brought into this project. I always come into a project looking for a personal connection to the story. There's nothing random about the filmmaking that we're engaged in. For me, there's always some journey that I've gone on with the material, and then I look to a filmmaker like Rita to just take me further, to find those things about the person that I didn't know about or maybe didn't have the opportunity to appreciate as much. And so I really studied her style as a storyteller. And she talks about transition. I came into this seeing Rita as a narrative director, as a documentary director, as just a fine storyteller. And you see it in the techniques that she uses in the film, in fact. And I actually saw that as an advantage, that she brought that sensibility, that you see a very thoughtful weaving together of archival footage, of reenactments, of animation, of voiceover. There were so many elements that you're able to incorporate into this film, and not everyone has the ability to take all of those elements and make them work together in one film as seamlessly as you did here. You are that storyteller. In many ways, I feel like we saw that version. She was able to give us the missing pieces that archival did not capture, that history may not have seen, and we saw the most full version of Marian Anderson that we could have been exposed to.
Any other questions?
Gentleman right here, front and center.
Okay.
So, first of all, thank you for a fantastic movie. It was emotional. It was a concert. It was just great storytelling. So I have a two-part question. Part one, tell us about the creative process that you went through to make the film happen. And then second, what are some other things that you may be working on in the future?
That's Orpheus for me, if you didn't know. That's my husband, who always asks me questions about my work. And he's with my family, my Aunt Eudora, Aunt Willie, Sherry, and Tasha. Thanks for coming. I want to tell you that the creative process is really one that I go straight to my faith with. I go by, in the beginning, God created. And so I believe that at our core, we are all creators, that we take dark, deep chaos and we make something out of it every day. And so when you look at a person's life and when you approach the honor of being able to tell it, I think you should all be using your cell phones and capturing the oldest people in your families and sharing it with the youngest people. I would go through tapes on the way to traveling with my children, and I would put on tapes of aunts so they could hear and they'd laugh about the way she said she hoped it instead of she helped it. But they were hearing Mama May May. And you have to take your church bulletins or whatever it is and save these things because people won't know who they are. So the creative process for me is one of my superpower is that I keep going. I don't care what people say. I'm looking for the story. And if you chase the story hard enough, it will begin to chase you. So I take myself to Philadelphia, and I stay with my son, and I go to the library before I'm really on board with the story, and a librarian says, we're just getting ready to digitize these tapes. And I'm like, ooh, that means I need to use those tapes. I don't know what's going to be out there in any of these works, but you just have to chase it and listen, and it comes to you, and that's how you create it. So that's the creative process. And I don't know what your other question was.
What's coming up?
Okay. So I want to say something about what Brenda did. Brenda was sitting by me, and Michael Barker was sitting by me. And I start talking about Marian Anderson, and without any hesitation, Brenda said, I'll be your executive producer. And that brought money into the project and made the project possible. And that is really, really important. That is really important because we have all these great ideas and we can't do it unless we can do it. I am very happy to say that on Tuesday of this week, my team, a great team, we were awarded with the highest grant amount from the NEH, the National Endowment of the Arts, for our proposal on W.E.B. Du Bois. Thank you. And so that will be my next documentary, and God's answering that prayer because I wanted to tell the story of my people, so I went from 1928 to 1897. Now I'm going back to 1868, and I'm actually ready for some fiction now because it's hard. You live with this for 2 to 3 years. You live reading and thinking and trying to figure it out. And it's just a blessing to have the honor to tell anyone's life story, to even attempt it. And you just work as hard as you can because you want to respect that. And for me, it's about my culture, my race. I'm very happy to be African American. I'm very happy to support my people. I'm very happy to show everyone who they are. And I just want to say this, if it were not for people like Eleanor Roosevelt, Albert Einstein, and people who had power to step off of privilege and reach out, that everybody can do that. You can hire somebody you wouldn't normally hire. You can have conversations with people and not get caught in the stereotype. This is at the core of who we really are and who we have to be in order to really coexist. I love that Marian Anderson said, if you put a person down, you have to be down there with them. And that's not ever going to help us.
And that is what allyship looks like.
I think we've got time for one more question before we get to the performance. So any other questions out there? I think we'll get to the performance. Thank you so much. Please join me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You may have noticed in the film how, you may have noticed in the film how important it was for Miss Anderson to choose the person who was going to accompany her on the piano. And this afternoon, we are very fortunate to have Katie Barr. She was formerly a Boston-based pianist and vocal coach. She was a first-year DMA student in vocal coaching and worked as a freelance pianist for opera. She was also at the Boston Conservatory at Berkeley, music director and vocal coach with Boston Opera Collaborative, and pianist with Opera on Tap. She's currently a teaching assistant at the Lyric Theater of Illinois. Please help me welcome Miss Katie Barr, who's going to be accompanying our singer. And we're going to give her just a few moments to make sure everything's all set. Okay, this is what they tell us at the opera sometimes while we're waiting. If you have to get a little throat clearing, let's do it now before we start the musical portion. And now I'd like to introduce our soprano. She's a Houston, Texas native. Vivica Richards is currently pursuing her master's in performance and literature at the University of Illinois here in Urbana-Champaign under the vocal direction of Yvonne Redman. Recently, she made her role debut as Susanna in The Marriage of Figaro at Krannert Center in Champaign, Illinois. As a previous student in attendance at Stephen F. Austin State University, She received the role of Monica in The Medium. She's an avid competitor. Most recently, she was awarded the Strauss Award at the Orpheus I think they gave me the wrong thing. Well, let me just tell you, you're in for a treat with the most diva soprano, Miss Vivica Richards. Please help me welcome her to the stage.
thank you all. That was an aria from Falstaff by Giuseppe Verdi. Now we will be singing two art songs by African American composers. One I love is called Prayer. That'll be the first one we sing, by H. Leslie Adams. It has text by Langston Hughes, the Harlem Renaissance poet. And our final art song will be called The Negro Speaks of Rivers by Margaret Bonds. It also has text by Langston Hughes. And Katie and I love these pieces, and we're so happy that we get to perform them for you. Which way to go? I ask you this, which sin to bear, which crown to put upon my head. I do not know, Lord God, I do not know. I ask you this, which way to go? I ask you this, which sin to bear, which crown to put upon my head. I do not know, Lord God, I do not know.
Miss Vivica Richards and Miss Katie Barr. Thank you. That was lovely. Thank you. Take another bow, please. Thank you.